Hi, my name is Mads, and here's some instructions on how to set up split SoundBanks in the Wwise Adventure Game. In the Unity project, start by going to the Audio Connect menu, Certification 255, Lesson 6, and Loading Region SoundBanks. When it's loaded, you'll see it in the hierarchy saying Lesson 6.2, Loading Region SoundBanks. In the Wwise Adventure Game, we have one big scene called the main scene, which is the entire world of Allegro Kingdom. And from that scene, we've set up several regions where even more assets are loaded when the player enters that region. If you look in the Wwise game object and bank regions, you'll see quite a few colliders around in the world. Whenever the player are inside any of these triggers, some assets will be loaded corresponding to that area. When the player is inside the village trigger, the village audio environment scene will be loaded. Let's drag the village scene into the hierarchy. This scene contains the loading of a bank and several other audio assets. But you could also have other game objects in there, like trees or stones that will load whenever the player is entering that area. So you don't have to have all the assets loaded at once. Let's go through how to set this up, and I will follow the procedure of the Certification 251 Lesson 6 section called Splitting SoundBanks. So first off, head into Wwise, the Lesson 6 Wwise Adventure Game Wwise project. And in the Project Explorer SoundBanks tab, in the Regions Work Unit, you'll see the different regions in the main scene, but there's no SoundBank for the desert region. So let's make the desert region by right-clicking, New Child, and SoundBank, and name it Desert. And go to the SoundBank layout. In the desert region, you'll find a few region-exclusive things, like the volcanic boulders. So let's add some content to the SoundBank. First, let's add the ambience. So go to Ambient, SoundBanks, and drag the ambient region desert into the SoundBank. Secondly, we need to add the volcanic boulders, which is only occurring near the volcano located in the desert. So select the destruction volcanic impact and drag it into the desert. You also need to load the player footsteps. And to do that, you need to get the player footsteps and drag them into the desert SoundBank. If you go into the game sinks, you'll see a lot of surface types for the footsteps. And there's a lot of surfaces here that you won't see in the desert, like grass and leaves and so on. So instead of loading all of these assets when they are not needed, let's only load the most necessary things. There's sand, stone, water, and wood, and the rest can be deselected. Select Exclude All, and select Include. The 4 assets you marked will be included. We've now included the surfaces, but there's also different variations for running and walking with the adventurer. And as such, we need to include the 2 switches, movement speed run and movement speed walk. Now select all SoundBanks, at least Windows platform and English, and press generate. Now everything in the main scene is set up and working correctly. So let's go into Audio Kinetic Certification 251, Lesson 6, and select the Loading Region SoundBanks to demonstrate how to set this up. So if you look in the Wwise game object and select the AK bank, notice that the all-in-one SoundBank is loading when the game awakes. The all-in-one SoundBank is a SoundBank of all assets in the game. And by loading all assets at once, you take up a huge chunk of memory that cannot be unloaded unless you unload the entire thing. Instead, if you separate your content into multiple SoundBanks, like for regions or for quests and so on, you'll be able to unload a lot of assets when you're not using them. So let's disable the all-in-one SoundBank in the Unity project. So select the bank name and press reset. Now for the multiple scene setup, we have one general SoundBank, which is a SoundBank for a lot of common things throughout the Wwise Adventure Game. And we have the region SoundBanks and we have the context SoundBanks. So instead of the all-in-one SoundBank, we want to load the general SoundBank, which you can find in the general work unit. But now we're still missing the sounds located in the different regions. So for the split SoundBanks, we set up a series of colliders. So select the bank regions, and in the inspector, select Enable. If you select one of the bank regions, you'll see a script called Load Scene Async On Enter. And that script is simply loading a scene with the different audio assets needed for that region. For the desert region, we have set up this connection, but we need you to add the loading of the SoundBank in that scene. You can either go to Audio Kinetic Certification 251 Lesson 6 and Desert SoundBank Scenes, or you can head into the project and select Scenes, Game Scenes, Certificate Scenes, and Desert Audio Environment. Now this scene might seem very empty, but that's because it's a scene added on top of the world itself. Start by locating the Wwise object. And in the inspector, look for the AK bank. And you can see the SoundBank is loaded on a wake of this scene, meaning that whenever it's loaded. But there's no SoundBank assigned to it. So let's select the drop-down and find the Desert SoundBank. And save the project. Let's now try it out and meanwhile profile the game to ensure that the bank is loaded. So head into Audiokinetic, Certification, 251, Lesson 6, and Loading Region SoundBanks scene. In Wwise, select the profiler and press Remote and connect to the editor. Head into Unity and press play. Head to the desert region and you can easily use the teleport to jump to that region. And press Escape and exit play mode. In the profiler, Advanced Profiler, select the Memory tab, drag the time cursor a bit back. The Desert SoundBank has now successfully been loaded. If you are following the certification or want to learn more about Wwise Adventure Game, you can click on the signpost.